Hello everyone, this is Gary with Rage Quit Magic the Gathering. Just wanted to bring you guys my Marchesa deck. Marchesa the Black Rose, legendary human wizard. She costs 4 and she's Grixis colors. This is awesome. When I saw this leaked for Conspiracy, I got really excited because I've always kind of wanted to play a Grixis deck, but I'm not much for control, so having the ability to play a Grixis aggro deck is pretty sweet. Let's look at our commander real quick. She has Dethrone, which is whenever this creature attacks, the player with the most life or tied for the most life, put a +1/+1 counter on it. A lot of people, when at first glance, they think that it's whenever this creature attacks the opponent with the highest life. No, she actually counts you as well. So player with the highest life. So if you have 40 life and everyone else is at 38, you will not get your Dethrone trigger. Luckily, this deck is pretty good at keeping our life total the lowest. She also has other creatures you control have Dethrone. Really awesome for an aggro shell. Her last paragraph is probably the most important one. Whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it dies, return that card to the battlefield under your control at the beginning of the next end step. So, playing aggro, one of the biggest things you have to worry about is getting board wiped after you just crapped your whole hand onto the board. She kind of helps with this. And notice it says whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter, not another creature you control. So if she has a +1/+1 counter on her and she dies, you can send her to the graveyard, and at the end of turn, she comes back. So this deck kind of has, the whole deck feels like it has Undying / Grave Betrayal that affects us. So it's really fun. First, start with the lands. Four islands. Three swamp. Four mountains. This deck gives us the chance to do some really fun stuff with our lands. One of them being, we run a nice grip of manlands. Mutavault, Lava Collar Reaches, the Fairy Conclave, Creeping Tar Pit, and Gitu Encampment. Looking at getting Inkmoth and Blinkmoth Nexus because they're both pretty good manlands as well. But the cool thing is with Marchesa, all of our creatures have Dethrone, so when these become creatures, they have Dethrone. Then if we attack the player with the highest life total, they get a +1 counter. And then at the end of turn, they're no longer creatures. So you can go ahead and Wrath away. My lands will keep their +1/+1 counters and pretty much can only die to land destruction or instant speed removal. Really fun with her. Another fun thing that Marchesa allows us to do is we want to keep our life total the lowest amongst all players. So that means Pain Lands, City of Brass, Grand Coliseum, taking shock damage off of our shock lands, and quite possibly the best, Ancient Tomb. Taking 2 damage every time we tap it for mana will keep us at a nice and controlled level of life. Sorry about that. 3 colored lands, Cavern of Souls, Crumbling Necropolis, Command Tower. Most often, Cavern of Souls will come in naming Wizard, not Human. Temple of Malice, Temple of Deceit, Dragon Skull Summit, Drowned Catacomb, Temple of Epiphany, Bojuka Bog, Teleria West, Halimar Depths, Reliquary Tower, and Academy Ruins make up the rest of our land. Believe it or not, we actually draw quite a bit of cards, so this Reliquary Tower is nice and useful. We don't run that much ramp, but we also have a fairly low mana curve. Our ramp comes in the form of Burnished Heart. See if I'm focused. There we go. Okay, Burnished Heart. Solemn Simulacrum. This guy is awesome with Marchesa's giving it Dethrone and then her final paragraph. He'll die, search us a land, end a turn, come back, draw us a card. Talisman of Indulgence and Talisman of Dominance allow us to control our life total again. Tapping it for color reduces us by 1. Soul Ring and Mana Vault, which again, leaving it tapped in the upkeep will deal 1 damage to us. I run 3 Planeswalkers. Nicobolas, Planeswalker. Dak Faden, Ashiok, Nightmare Weaver. Nicobolas can really change the tide of games, and who doesn't want to play a giant 8-cost dragon Planeswalker? Dak Faden helps us cycle through our deck, and gaining control of an artifact is nothing to scoff at. Ashiok, we want to put our opponent's creatures into play under our control. If we can attack with a creature that we control but don't own, and then it dies, Marchesa does not put it back into the battlefield under its controller's control. It puts it back under the battlefield under our control. So that's really relevant. Black Market, because we're going to have a lot of things dying. So gaining that mana will really help. Unspeakable Symbol. Pay 3 life, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Control our life total. Putting a +1/+1 counter on a creature can save it from being removed. Vampiric Tutor, search for anything and keep our life under control. These are just some creatures that work really well with Marchesa. Needle Spectre. So what will happen is you'll attack the player with the highest life total, put a +1/+1 counter on it, then they'll mill 2 cards. Every single time, it'll get higher and higher. Mikaeus puts +1/+1 counters on our things that die that didn't have +1/+1 counters. This combo makes things really hard to kill. Mikaeus does not give Marchesa Undying though. Miri, the Cursed. She has Flying, First Strike, and Haste. She gives herself +1/+1 counters. What more could he ask for? Hypnotic Spectre to run rampant on their hand. Chasm Skulker puts +1/+1 counters on himself, and when he dies, he makes a bunch of little squids, and then he'll come back just to do it over and over again. Thassa, scrying, controlling what's going to be coming next is really relevant, and giving our stuff unblockable even more so. Blazing Spectre has haste and flying, so it's got that evasion we need, plus it messes with their hand. Olivia Volderin, she puts +1/+1 counters on herself, and she can steal our opponent's stuff. Never thought I would play this in Commander, but Marchesa makes her actually really good. She's almost impossible to kill as long as Marchesa is on the battlefield, because she puts a +1/+1 counter on herself right away. Dax Duplicant, amazing card. Dethrone does stack, so if you have Marchesa on the field, Dax Duplicant on the field is something else. It will actually have Dethrone, and it'll trigger twice. Stormbreath Dragon. Keep in mind, it deals damage to each opponent equal to the number of cards in their hand, and he puts +1/+1 counters on himself. Prophetic Flame Speaker. He's kind of a form of card draw, but the double strike and trample make him a real beast when he starts getting all the +1/+1 counters. Sorry if you can hear that, my cat's getting into something. Disciple of Bolas will be netting us a lot of cards. Our creature will come back if it has a +1/+1 counter on it and Marchesa is in play. And it'll help us gain a little bit of all the damage that we've been doing to ourselves. Oh, I'm getting into card draw now with Disciple. River Kelpie. Whenever he comes in, him or another permanent comes... Okay, sorry. Whenever River Kelpie or another permanent is put into play from your graveyard, draw a card. So, with Marchesa, we'll be drawing a decent number of cards off of them. Whenever a spell is played from a graveyard, draw a card. This recognizes both. It doesn't have to come under my play for me to draw a card. Persist. With Persist, if you have Marchesa out and he already has a -1/-1 counter on him, and you attack the player with the highest life, it will remove the -1/-1 counter. Thus, you can actually persist again. Harvester of Souls will be losing a lot of stuff off of the board. This recognizes the whole board as well, so if another creature dies or if there's a Wrath spell, you'll be drawing a decent amount of cards. Graveborn Muse draws us cards. We do run a couple of other zombies. She draws us cards. She keeps our life total nice and low. Same for Blood Gift Demon, but this is on a 5/4 fatty with flying. Necropotence, Tomato. Control our life, keep our hand full. Seeing as this is an aggro deck, Bident of Thassa is very relevant for when we connect with all of our creatures, drawing us a nice full grip. Draw extra card, lose a life. Good for keeping our life under control. Like I said, we draw a lot of cards in this deck. Having Goal Lich, my converted mana cost for most of this deck is pretty low, so I can always grab something from my graveyard. Grabbing something from someone else's graveyard is even better, because if it dies and it has a counter on it, yeah. These cards are really fun if you have Marchesa on the board and you don't have the highest life total. They all kind of do close to the same. Spinal Embrace, untap target creature you don't control and gain control of it. It gains haste until end of turn. At the beginning of the next end step, sacrifice it. If you do, you gain life equal to its toughness. Slave of Bolus does the same thing, except for it's not an instant and you don't gain the life. Cauldron Dance is amazing. Return a creature card from your graveyard to play. That creature gains haste. Return it to your hand at end of turn. And then the second part is put a creature card from your hand into play. That creature gains haste. Put it into your graveyard at end of turn. So this is actually errated. It sacrifice it at the end of turn. So what that means is we put something into from our hand into play for free. We get something from the graveyard onto the battlefield for free. We attack with both of them. If we have a sack outlet, sacrifice both of them. They come back. And then Treacherous Urge is a lot of fun. Target opponent reveals his or her hand. You may put a creature card from it into play under your control. That creature gains haste. Sacrifice it at the end of turn. So again, if it has a counter on it, when we sacrifice it, it will stay ours. Helm of Possession. We're getting into my sack outlets. Falconwrath Aristocrat is awesome. Has haste too, so it's just going to get beefy. Grimgrin Corpseborn. Carrion Feeder and Viscera Seer for our 1-drops. Our removal is Duplicant, Nevinyrral's Disc, Oblivion Stone. The Living Death will almost always benefit us more than most people because we will sacrifice our creatures and they'll come back at the end of turn. Plus we'll get the creatures that we've already lost. Toxic Deluge, Fleshbag Marauder, and Slum Reaper. Flayer of the Hatebound is really awesome with all the creatures we have constantly coming back to the battlefield, including Flayer of the Hatebound, who has Undying. Phyrexian Metamorph as Flayer of the Hatebound, pretty awesome. Note, if he's a creature and he comes back due to Marchesa, you can have him copy something else. Necrotic Ooze. Almost all of our sack outlets are built onto creatures and are free, so Necrotic Ooze will have those sack outlets. He can also go monstrous, which is kind of funny if the Stormbreath Dragon is in the graveyard. Perforos, with all of this stuff coming back into play over and over. Now is our control package. When I was building this, for picking my control cards, I needed something that costs a little bit but did a lot. Venoblast and Shattering Spree both do that. Linelandra, sacrifice her to counter a spell, or a non-creature spell, sorry. She has Persist, so all we have to do is counter a non-creature spell and then attack with her while we have Marchesa out, and she'll lose that -1/-1, so we can keep doing that. Misdirection can essentially be free. Pact of Negation lets us tap out. Most removal is going to be in the form of instant speed, so we want Marchesa to stay on the board. We need to protect her if they try to condemn her. Dispel helps us with that. Cryptic Command usually is going to counter a spell and tap permanents, or it can return if they have one big blocker, then they don't anymore. Swan Song, kind of like Dispel. I'm a dick for playing it, but if you're playing blue, you're probably going to be running Cyclonic Rift. Good early game, amazing late game. And our major win condition is Insurrection. This is Insurrection. Gaining control of all creatures, attacking with them all, dethrone triggers, and then sacrificing all of the creatures to have them stay in play on my side of the board. There's not much you can do to come back from that. Okay, this was Marchesa, the Black Rose. What would you guys do different? If you guys have a Marchesa, link us to it. Let us check it out. And please comment, rate, and subscribe. Thanks for checking out my video.